Hello and welcome to Thought Provoking Tech. I'm Zach, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my new video series, Cloud Gaming Head-to-Head. So in Cloud Gaming Head-to-Head, I'm going to be pitting viable cloud gaming service providers against each other and seeing who come out on top. So one of the strong baseline criteria that I have for what I consider a viable cloud gaming service provider is that they must offer an open catalog. So what I mean by open catalog is they must allow you to install games from Steam, Origin, Battle.net, or any of the different game purchasing libraries out there, or something that you purchase directly from the web, such as Adobe software. I know Adobe isn't a game per se. You kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about when open catalog. You can install any piece of software that you have purchased, or even software that is freely available onto your cloud gaming desktop. This makes it equivalent to what your local machine is, where you have complete freedom of what you play on and what you download and install. I strongly believe that the cloud gaming desktops that offer a restricted library of games that you might have to purchase again, which is completely crazy, or you kind of rent the entire library, is quite silly, because maybe the games you want to play from that rented library you've already purchased, so you're kind of in a way still paying for that again, kind of like having to purchase it again through their library. Another strong reason why open catalogs are important, in my opinion, is some providers, let's take EA for example, maybe down the road they will allow this closed platform to have installs of their game not through Origin, but maybe they allow, or maybe they have like a 2-week, 4-week window where Origin is completely exclusive, and then down the road this closed platform might be able to have the same game. So that'll essentially mean if your friend buys a game on his local gaming machine, he might be 2 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of you, and you're stuck without being able to play with him, or her for that matter, for 2 to 4 weeks because of the exclusive. I definitely see that as something that could be a possibility down the road, and an open catalog completely negates that issue. So I strongly feel that an open catalog is an important criteria. The other kind of set of criteria is I do a little bit of kind of initial testing just to see if the service is worth anything at all. Like if you can play games, if it has decent latency, and then I'll go from there and do more extensive testing down the road inside of these head-to-head videos. But I will kind of do a kind of general baseline to see if the service is even worth testing. So those are my two kind of baseline criteria, whether it has an open catalog and if it, as a baseline, can function as a cloud gaming desktop. So that's kind of a little bit on the kind of the baselines and some of the criteria for the cloud gaming service providers. So now moving on, I'll talk about the two that I'm going to be at least starting off in season 1, if you want to call it that, of this new video series. I will be testing LiquidSky, and I will be testing Paperspace plus Parsec. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to LiquidSky and talk a little bit about my reasoning behind choosing LiquidSky and why I think it is a viable option to do further testing, and kind of my experience with LiquidSky so far, and where I expect to see it, in the near future. Alright, so on the LiquidSky side, if you look through my video history, you'll see I have done quite extensive testing on LiquidSky with several videos in my video history, and by several I mean probably 10 to 12 videos. So you can see that I've done quite a lot of testing with LiquidSky, and I have actually not made videos on everything I've kind of tested, and in fact I've actually used LiquidSky for much more than gaming. I've done 3D CAD, 3D rendering, and video editing as just a couple examples of what I've actually used the service for. So it was a very strong service, but there was a very rough period in their recent history, and that was when they made the move from LiquidSky 1.0 to LiquidSky 2.0. I personally would have done things a little bit differently. I don't know if they didn't have the capital required to kind of rent additional space from IBM, because that's kind of who they're working with with their service. but they completely took the service down to make the move from 1.0 to 2.0. And on the most basic level, that evolved going from Windows Server 2012 to Windows Server 2016, which for the consumer side is essentially going from Windows 8 to Windows 10, because they kind of have the server set up so they're pretty identical to those consumer versions of the OS. So the kind of upgrade process took much longer, and because they were completely down, there was a lot of negativity about that, and you couldn't really utilize the service at all. So I really think that if they would have kept both and kind of did the upgrade process slowly maybe, and upgraded people in batches possibly, it would have been a much smoother process. There was a lot of bugs in the new user interface, but we're good to the point now where it's pretty much where it was in LiquidSky 1.0. There are still some issues of actually accessing the service, I guess due to demand, and not having enough kind of capacity and not having enough extra buffer in their services. On the most basic level, I will say that is a big difference between the two. I've never had an issue of accessing my Paperspace computer. Every time I've hit turn on, it's always been able to get the capacity that I've requested from the service, and I can't say the same for LiquidSky even at this point in time. It is much better now than it was, and they've actually removed the highest tier, performance tier, from LiquidSky to kind of combat the issue of not having enough capacity. But I'll kind of get into the more specifics on that in these head-to-head videos, and that's kind of what they're intended for. But on the very baseline, though, the LiquidSky service is excellent. They've done a lot of work on their encoding and decoding to have very little latency, and I mean very little. I can't tell it at all. I'm sure people that have high latency or high refresh rate monitors wouldn't be able to tell possibly that that there is the encoding and decoding, and these aren't something I would recommend for like a professional, like CS:GO player where every millisecond counts. And I don't think that cloud gaming is really to that point yet, unless like everybody competing was on a cloud gaming desktop, so that you kind of had the same offset in latency. But that's not really the topic of this video right now. I'm just kind of talking about kind of the different competitors right now. So that's kind of the LiquidSky boat. They have a very solid underlying technology. They've kind of made it through their growing pains from the 2.0 service. So they're now a pretty darn good service. And they do have some unique features, such as the ability to dynamically, very easily change the performance tier that you're actually launching into, which is something that Paperspace can't do nearly as easy, and at some points can't do at all, depending on what type of server that you're using. So that is a pretty big benefit on LiquidSky, and I'll kind of in these head-to-heads have different topics, and that'll be the purpose of these videos, is to see where this excels versus that, and then you can kind of take those videos and see like, okay, this feature or this game is important to me. I want to make sure that that feature and this game, whatever it works on, and kind of weigh all those different features and games that I'll be testing and the benchmarks that I'll be doing, and you can kind of weigh which service is really best for you. So the other competitor that I have in this head-to-head series for season 1, if you want to call it that, is Paperspace plus Parsec. So Paperspace is a cloud desktop provider. They're advertising more as a general blanket from anyone from businesses to people doing AI and machine learning research. They're kind of casting a much wider net, and they have a service not too dissimilar from what you can do with AWS from Amazon or Microsoft Azure or any of those big cloud providers out there. The reason I've chosen Paperspace is because they have very competitive pricing, and I'll probably do a video on pricing and comparing LiquidSky and Paperspace, of course. But when I do that, I'll probably compare what Paperspace, how it competes against the other big providers out there, such as Amazon's AWS. So Paperspace actually provides the raw computing performance. What Parsec does, though, is it kind of acts as the encoder and decoder between your Paperspace cloud desktop and your local machine. They've done a lot of work on their software to make it so that you can have very low latency access to your cloud desktop. So Paperspace actually has a web app as well as a desktop app. but there is much higher latency between those services than you would have with the Parsec client. So Paperspace, the latency in that seems to be pretty similar to the RDP protocol. Like if you use Microsoft's RDP client, you can definitely use like 3D CAD programs and things where latency isn't as vital. But for gaming, you really want a super low latency experience. And that's where Parsec comes in and really delivers that option to the table. So with that in mind, that's kind of why I've chosen to utilize Parsec with Paperspace. So combining those two, we end up with the LiquidSky, which has kind of the all-in-one service with a focus just on gaming. And then we have Paperspace combined with Parsec. There are other alternatives out there right now, such as NVIDIA has an option, but their current public option is a closed marketplace, and that's something I really don't believe in. I do know that NVIDIA is working on a more open marketplace, but they haven't made that publicly available yet. And when that does come around, I will kind of do some initial testing and probably include that in kind of this head-to-head battles. But at this point in time, the two services that I've chosen are LiquidSky and Paperspace combined with Parsec. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up this first video, guys. I've introduced the concept of the video series in general, as well as introduced the first two contestants for this first season, if that is what you want to call it. So I'm really ready to start testing this. I've tested LiquidSky quite heavily and had very promising results from it. And I've been using Paperspace quite heavily too, just not in a gaming form to this point. So I'm kind of excited to see how these two services evolve and kind of who wins in different battles and who comes out on top for different feature sets. And I hope this video series highlights the strong future for cloud gaming, but also highlights the current weaknesses in cloud gaming, so that hopefully we can push for those features to be developed that will really make cloud gaming viable for the mainstream. I don't think we're all that far from having cloud gaming enter the mainstream market with NVIDIA's big push in their new software that's going to have an open marketplace. I think that'll be a big push. And as more people start to learn about these services, I do think that they will start to become more mainstream. The underlying technology is already very strong and very promising at this point in time. I think we're now just kind of on the border of when people will actually start using this more and more. And it is a very interesting concept of having a super powerful computer. No matter where you are, you can even actually use these while on the road on a little bitty i3 laptop, and it's a very cool concept. So I hope you're as excited about this video series as I am. I'm ready to start producing some of these videos and kind of going head to head with the cloud gaming providers out there. So if you're excited for this video series, give this current video a big like so I know that. Feel free to leave any comments in the description below for some of the first tests you might be wanting to see. Any games you're really wanting to benchmark right off the bat. I will probably end up purchasing some games I don't already have, so if you have any requests, go ahead and send those out in the description below or in the comments below. And if you're interested in this video series or any other videos that I produce, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you'll see my videos in your feed, and also hit that bell icon if you're really interested into getting my videos, so you'll be notified every time I do release a new video. Beyond that, guys, check out the links in the description below and also in the banner that rotates for different ways to chat and support thought-provoking tech. So thanks for watching this video, and until next time, Zach out.